Alright, so this deck right here is basically just a Gren Maju OTK, which tries to get him to really high attack power values with Pot of Desires, Eater of Millions, and Necroface. The way it does that is obviously just using Pot of Desires normally to banish 10 cards and go -9. Then you have Eater of Millions, which allows you to banish your entire extra deck if you want, to get 15 cards out there, which gives them, I don't know, like 6,000 attack or something. I didn't actually do any math. It might be a little bit less than that. And then Necroface with Golden Sarcophagus to banish 5 cards, and to possibly just use it to search out Gren Maju itself. And the entire deck just revolves around bringing Gren Maju out. Or maybe the Golden Homunculus, because he does basically the same thing, he's just harder to bring out. Alright, so final thoughts on this deck. This deck is way better than I thought it would be. And in fact, when I was looking up decks to get some idea of how this one would work better, I saw that someone had used this deck to like top an event. I was like, oh, yeah, I can see that. Their deck was a little bit different. Theirs was way more heavily on stall. So they ran like triple Scarecrow and triple Battle Fader, which I thought would actually probably make this deck a little bit better. And basically, there was a couple of other variations to it as well. But what I took away from that deck was Time Lord was a great addition to the deck and totally allowed me to actually win a game or two that I would have lost otherwise. Because clearing out that backfield was so great. I totally would have lost this one game if I didn't have Time Lord. And also, I probably could have ran triple Twin Twisters, but double was good enough. And I can totally see how that stall would have helped out. Because I thought my thing with running Soul Absorption was I'm going to have so much life points that I don't need to run stall. Because I'll just have so many life points that they won't be able to beat over me. And what ended up happening was I never actually drew into Soul Absorption, except for one match. So that, yes, potentially it's a lot of life points, but you have to draw into it like real early. Otherwise, I'll draw into it late game and already have half your deck banished. Eater of Millions and Pot of Desires are what allows this deck to shine. Without those two cards, I don't think it'd be anywhere near as good as it ended up being. Because Pot of Desires, banish 10 cards, that's 4,000 attack. Eater of Millions, banish 15 cards from your extra deck. What is that? It's not 4,000. I want to say 6,000. And I think that might be, what's 5 times 4? It's 2,000. I mean 20. So yeah, 2,000. It is 6,000. Oh, I got that right at the intro. Yeah, so an Eater of Millions gives him 6,000 attack if you banish your entire extra deck. Pot of Desires gives him 4,000 attack. And these two cards are just good, like on their own. Eater of Millions is ran normally in just meta decks because his effect is really good. And so is Pot of Desires because it's just a really good searcher. Not a searcher, it's a deck thinner. A card advantager. It allows you to draw 2 cards, which is really good. And I even made the joke at the beginning that it's a -9. Although some people will even say it's a -11. It's not. It's a +1. It's an effortless +1, just like Pot of Greed. It's just you can't run it in decks that are superly reliant on like a specific combo. And most meta decks aren't really. Most meta decks are just about having a consistent deck that can do anything with whatever hand you get. So Pot of Desires is usually just good in a lot of meta decks. It's not as good, unfortunately, in like gimmick decks. Or, you know, like super specific combos. Like you can't run it in Exodia, for example, because you need those 5 pieces from your deck in order to win. Otherwise, you're completely screwed. Or just a lot of the gimmick decks I run. So if I can run Pot of Desires in the gimmick decks I do, I will. That's like one of the first things I think of is, can I run Pot of Desires in this deck? And I usually am sad if the case is no, which is usually the case, because for the decks I do, I'm trying to pull off something really specific. Rarely am I just building the deck around the deck itself being consistent. It's usually just around some stupid gimmick. So unfortunately I can't use Pot of Desires as much as gimmicky decks. I mean, as much as meta decks do. Except in this one. Different Dimension Reincarnation. My original build, I didn't run this card until I watched the video on the deck that topped, and they ran 3 copies, and basically their whole thing was you're going to win in 1 turn anyway, so discarding a card isn't a big deal. I was like, yeah, fair enough. Plus, this deck banishes so much, especially through Necroface or Golden Sarcophagus, that you can just straight up get a Gren Maju out that way pretty easily. I was like, oh, that is a really good idea. I guess I should run 3 as well. And then my version, I just included Giant Rex. It actually helped me win one of the games. Fairy Tale Snow, because I thought it'd be a good way to banish my graveyard later game, plus it's just a good card. I've always been running a Kaiju, just because there's that odd deck that has like a super hard to get over boss monster, and it's so satisfying just to throw a Kaiju down on top of it. Also, For the extra deck, oh, I should probably mention Bottomless Trap Hole, Macros Cosmos, and Dimensional Fissure. Those are just in here for fluff, to kind of fit the theme of the name of the deck, because the deck's going to be called Banish the World. And I thought Bottomless Trap Hole fits fine. It's a good card. Macros Cosmos and Dimensional Fissure, I don't really need them in this deck. But they totally helped me win one of the games I did against like a true Draco player, since he didn't get any cards in the graveyard the whole duel. Because they usually don't run spell and trap card removal, because they can get rid of them no problem on their own. I mean, most of them like side deck it, so if it's one-off duels like what I'm doing, I usually have a really good advantage against those kinds of decks. And as for the extra deck, it was originally just a whole bunch of rank 3 monsters, and then I thought I might as well have some good cards in the extra deck just in case. Like if I need to get rid of Eater of Millions on the field, I can Link Karibo it. Or if, I don't know, my opponent manages to stall me out somehow, I can go into some rank 3s that all can benefit, because there's lots of level 3 monsters in here. Well, the main combo piece of this deck is a level 3 monster. Like this card right here, the Carrier Shark, it allows you to do 100 bird damage to your opponent for each of your banished monsters. And I did actually use it to win one of my matches. I don't show it in the video though, because I think it was a match against a fan and I just forgot to save it. Plus I already had enough footage by that point. Alternatively, Phantom Knight Breaksword could have won me that match as well. I forgot about it though. And I thought Leviathan Sea Dragon, I can use it to bring out Gren Maju, except the only way to bring him out is probably with 2 Gren Majus. So the extra deck is here basically to be banished. But it also can be used, I guess. Like if I banish a whole bunch of cards to set up a Gren Maju later on, I might banish everything but a Link Karibo with Eater of Millions. That's basically how I thought about that. And, of course, the side deck is just cards I had planned on putting in or were in a different build and I decided against. Because this one works fine. I think the better would probably just to copy the guy who topped with it. His deck looked like it's probably better, but this one worked too. This one worked out just fine as well.